You are driving. Hands on the wheel, eyes on the traffic, mind anywhere. The light turns green. You accelerate, turn left at the usual corner, drive straight for 3 blocks, park in the same spot. Everything is mechanical. Everything is automatic. You've done this route so many times that your body does it on its own. And then for a fleeting second, a question crosses your mind. Was I present at any point during this trip? The answer scares you. No, you weren't. Your body moved, your reflexes worked. But you, that part of you that observes, that feels, that exists, were absent. And worse, this didn't just happen now. It happens every day. In line at the supermarket, at breakfast, in automatic conversations, in absent hugs. You are alive, but you are not living. You are performing a sequence, following a script, playing a role. And no one around you seems to notice. Or worse, everyone notices, but they have accepted it as normal. It's a typical Tuesday. She wakes up, turns off the alarm clock, picks up her cell phone before even getting out of bed. Notifications, messages, emails. She responds to some, ignores others. She gets up, takes a shower, chooses the clothes she would choose on any other Tuesday. Coffee, traffic, office. Good morning. Everything's fine. Yes, thank you. Her voice comes out automatically. The smile comes automatically. All day long she functions. She solves problems, makes decisions, talks, produces. But at no point, at no real point, did she stop and ask herself, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Is this what I want? Or is it just what I've learned to do? At night when she goes to bed, she feels an inexplicable weight. It's not sadness. It's not physical exhaustion. It's a feeling of emptiness that shouldn't be there. After all, it was a productive day. She fulfilled her obligations. She did everything right. And yet when she closes her eyes, the question persists. Where was I during this day? Where am I now? Schopenhauer would call this the veil of Maya, an illusion so deep, so structural that you don't even realize you're living inside it. You believe you're awake, but you're just following a script that was written before you were born. Learned movements, copied gestures, borrowed desires. And most disturbing of all, you call this life. It's not a problem of lack of moral awareness or discipline. It's not that you're making the wrong choices. The problem is deeper, more frightening. You may be living entire years without ever having made a choice that is truly your own. Everything you pursue, success, recognition, stability, love, may be just a repetition of a collective desire that you internalized so early that you confused it with your own will. Think about your mornings. How many times have you woken up and genuinely wanted to be there? How many times has your first action not been automatic but deliberate? How many times have you chosen what you feel, what you want, what you seek? The answer is uncomfortable because it reveals something that most people avoid facing. Much of life happens without us really being present in it. And the more you observe this in yourself, the more you realize that it is not an individual problem. It is systemic. It is invisible. It is the way we have been taught to exist. You live, but you live within a narrative that you did not write. And what is most unsettling, you do not know where this narrative begins and where you actually appear. Schopenhauer realized this centuries ago. He looked at the human condition and saw that we live trapped in a representation. We do not see the world as it is. We see a filtered, molded version distorted by our own minds. We firmly believe in this projection. We believe that our perceptions are reliable, that our desires are authentic, that our convictions are solid. But all of this, absolutely everything, may just be a sophisticated illusion. A theater where you are both the actor and the audience. And the curtain never falls. Now, a question that can no longer be ignored. If much of your life happens without you really being present, who is in control? Who is choosing? Who is living? The question hung in the air. Who is in control? Who is choosing? And the answer Schopenhauer offers is even more disturbing than the question itself. Perhaps no one. Because before we can choose anything, before we can even think about control, there is a much more fundamental problem. You have never seen the world. Never. Not even once. It sounds absurd, I know. After all, you're seeing it now. You're reading these words. You're aware of your surroundings. But here's what Schopenhauer wants you to understand. Everything you experience is not the world itself. It's a representation, a translation, a version shaped, filtered, and constructed by your own mind. The world as it really is, the thing in itself, as Kant called it, remains eternally out of your reach. All you have access to are shadows, and you spend your entire life believing that these shadows are reality. Think about how many times you've been absolutely sure of something, and then discovered you were completely wrong. You saw someone from afar, were sure it was a friend, waved, smiled, and when the person approached, it was a complete stranger. Your brain constructed an identity based on fragments, height, posture, hair color. and gave you a conclusion as if it were a fact, and you believed it, because that's what we do. We wholeheartedly believe the conclusions our mind gives us without questioning the process that produced them. Or think about a text message. You read it and immediately assign a tone to it. Hostility, perhaps. Coldness. You feel the tension, construct an entire narrative about what the other person was thinking, feeling, intending. You respond based on that. Days later, you discover that your interpretation was completely wrong. The person wasn't angry. They were just in a hurry. But you didn't read hurry. You read anger. Because your mind doesn't read what's there. It constructs meanings from limited data, fills in gaps, projects emotions, and delivers all of this to you as truth. These small errors should be a warning, but they are not. We continue to blindly trust our perception, as if it were a faithful mirror of reality. Schopenhauer realized that this is a tragic mistake. Our perception is not a mirror. It is a filter, an imperfect translator. And worse, it is a translator that operates based on assumptions we never examine. You see what you have been trained to see. You interpret what you have been conditioned to interpret, and you call it reality. There is a classic experiment in psychology. Two images of the same color are shown to a group of people, but the colors are placed in different contexts. One next to dark tones, the other next to light tones. People swear they are different colors. They are not. They are exactly the same color. But the context alters perception so profoundly that even after knowing they are identical, many people continue to see different colors. Their eyes capture the same information, but their brains construct different realities. Now expand that, not just to colors, but to everything. People, situations, values. You don't see people as they are. You see projections shaped by your past experiences, your fears, your expectations. You don't see situations objectively. You interpret them through an emotional lens that is always active, always influencing, always distorting. And you don't realize you're doing it. Because the most effective illusion is the one that passes itself off as truth. Schopenhauer came to a brutal conclusion. The world is my representation. Everything that exists for you, absolutely everything, is a mental construct. You never leave your own head. You never touch reality directly. You live eternally within a simulation created by your brain, believing it to be real. And the scariest thing, there is no way out. There is no way to verify whether your perception corresponds to the real world. Because the only tool you have to verify anything is your own perception. It's like trying to use a crooked ruler to measure whether it is crooked. And then the inevitable question arises. If your perception is so unreliable, how many of your deepest convictions are real? How many times have you fought with someone because you misinterpreted their intentions? How many decisions have you made based on fears that were never true? How many relationships have you lost because you saw betrayal, where there was only exhaustion, coldness where there was only distraction? You construct narratives. All the time, about yourself, about others, about what it means to be successful, about what it means to be loved, about what is worthwhile in life. And you treat these narratives as facts, but they are not facts. They are interpretations, stories you tell yourself until you believe they are true. And these stories determine everything. They determine what you pursue, what you avoid, what you feel, what you desire. The problem isn't that you're wrong about some things. The problem is that you could be wrong about everything. And there's no way to know. Because the illusion is perfect, it doesn't seem like an illusion. It seems like the most solid, most undeniable, most real thing there is. And that's exactly why you never question it. That's why you spend your whole life inside it, building on it, betting everything on it. And only when something collapses, when a certainty is revealed to be false, when a conviction is shattered, do you get a glimpse of how fragile the ground beneath your feet was. But even these glimpses are brief. Soon you rebuild. You find new certainties, new narratives, new representations that seem more solid, more true, and the cycle begins again. Because living without these representations is unbearable. You need to believe that your perceptions are reliable. You need to believe that your convictions are well-founded. You need to believe that the world you see is the world that exists. Because the alternative is the abyss. The possibility that everything is just a projection of your own mind. Schopenhauer knew this. He knew that most people, when faced with this truth, simply ignore it. Because it is easier to live within the illusion than to bear the weight of recognizing it. And so life goes on. You continue to see, feel, decide, believe, as if nothing had changed, as if the veil were not there. But now you know. You know that you have never seen the world for real. You know that everything you call reality is a construct. And the question that can no longer be avoided. If you have never seen the world, if everything is representation, then who is choosing what you see? Who is deciding what matters? What moves you? You may think that despite everything, you still have something that is yours. Your desires, your will, what you want out of life. But Schopenhauer has something even more disturbing to reveal. Your desires are not yours either. There is a force operating within you. A force you never chose, never controlled, never really understood. Schopenhauer called it will, and it is not rational. It is not wise. It does not care about your well-being. It is blind, brutal, insatiable, and it moves you like an invisible chain, dragging you from one desire to another, without ever asking you if that is what you really want. Have you ever found yourself wanting something intensely, gotten it, and days later realized that it made no difference? That promotion you pursued for months, the new car you saved so hard to buy, the person you wanted so badly to win over. When you finally got it, how long did the joy last? A week, a few days, hours? And then a new desire arose. Bigger, more urgent, as if the previous one had never existed. This is no accident. It is the nature of will. It doesn't want you to get anywhere. It just wants you to keep moving. Because will is not yours. You are its. You are merely a vehicle through which it manifests itself. And it has no destination, no ultimate goal. It is only hungry, perpetually hungry. And you confuse that hunger with purpose. Think about how many important decisions you've made in your life thinking you were in control. Choosing a career, entering into a relationship, moving to a new city, buying a house. At the time, it seemed like a conscious, thoughtful choice. But looking back, can you identify exactly why you wanted that? Or did you just feel an impulse, a need, a restlessness you couldn't name, and call it wanting? You didn't choose to have ambition. It arose in you. You didn't choose to feel attraction to someone. It just happened. You didn't choose to feel envy, fear, urgency. These impulses simply appeared, and you responded. You constructed rational narratives afterward. I want this because it makes sense. I need that because it's important. But the truth is that desire came first, and justification came later. Will commands. You obey, and you call it free will. Schopenhauer observed something brutal. We are not masters of our desires. We are slaves to them. And what's worse, we are so well-trained slaves that we believe we are in control. You wake up, and the first thing you feel is a vague restlessness. Something is missing. You don't know exactly what, but you know you need to do something. Check your phone, eat, work, shop, conquer, anything to calm that feeling of incompleteness. And when you do, the restlessness subsides for a while, and then it returns, stronger, demanding more. It's like an animal that never sleeps, always alert, always hungry, always on the prowl. And you feed that animal every day, believing that one day it will be satisfied. But it never is, because that's its nature. It exists to be hungry, and you exist to feed it. There are moments when you realize this. Moments when you look at your life and think, why am I running so much? Where am I going? But those moments are brief. Soon you get distracted. You find a new goal, a new desire, and the race begins again. Because stopping, really stopping, is unbearable. Without desire, without pursuit, without movement, what remains? Emptiness. And emptiness is terrifying. Schopenhauer saw this in culture, in society, in human history. Wars, empires, revolutions. All driven by this same blind force. Entire nations throw themselves into meaningless conquests, destroying each other, and call it progress. People accumulate wealth they can never spend, power they can never fully exercise, and call it success. But deep down, it's all a manifestation of the same will. Insatiable, irrational, purposeless. And you may think you're different, that your desires are more noble, more authentic. But are they? Do you want recognition because you genuinely value excellence? Or because the absence of recognition eats away at you inside? Do you seek love because you want to connect with someone? Or because loneliness terrifies you? Do you work so hard because you believe in what you do? Or because the idea of not being productive makes you feel useless? Will disguises itself. It puts on its finest clothes. It convinces you that what you want is lofty, meaningful, yours. But when you look closely, you realize it's always the same thing. A desperate attempt to fill a void that can never be filled. And the more you try, the more the void grows. Schopenhauer isn't saying this to depress you. He's saying it because it's true. And the truth, however cruel it may be, is the only possible starting point. Because as long as you believe that your desires are yours, as long as you believe that you are in control, you will remain trapped. Trapped in a cycle that has no end. Trapped in a quest that has no destination. But what if you stopped? What if for a moment you recognize that the will is not you? That these impulses that move you do not define who you are? Wouldn't that be a first step toward breaking free from prison? Or is it that, as Schopenhauer feared, most of us prefer to keep running? Because at least that way we don't have to face what happens when we stop. The answer to that question determines whether you will live as a puppet or have any chance of cutting the strings. But cutting the strings comes at a price, because on the other side of that liberation is not the happiness you were promised. It is something much more uncomfortable, something most people don't want to see. The price is this: discovering that there is no destination, there is no point of arrival, there is no moment when you can finally rest and say, "That's it, I've arrived." Because will doesn't work that way. It operates in a perpetual cycle: desire, search, achievement, boredom, and then inevitably a new desire. Always, without exception, without end. Schopenhauer described this as a pendulum that swings eternally between two extremes: the pain of what we don't have and the boredom of what we have already achieved. You suffer when you want something and can't get it. But when you finally get it, the satisfaction lasts so little that it soon turns into indifference. And from indifference comes boredom. And from boredom, a new desire, more intense, more urgent, as if the previous one had never existed. Think about the last time you achieved something you really wanted. A promotion, perhaps. You worked months, years for it. You sacrificed weekends, gave up time with people you loved, put all your energy and focus into that goal. And when it finally happened, you felt real euphoria. For 2, 3 days, maybe a week, you walked around with a feeling of victory. But soon it just became your new reality. The position was no longer an achievement and became just what you do. And before long, your mind was restless again, looking for the next level, comparing yourself to those above you, feeling that something was still missing. Or think about a relationship. You met someone, felt that overwhelming attraction, that certainty that this was it, that you had finally found what was missing. The first few months were intense. Every encounter was loaded with meaning. Every message made your heart race. And you thought, this is it. Now I'm complete. But time passed. The intensity diminished. What was once new became routine. And you began to feel that restlessness again. Not necessarily dissatisfaction with the person, but a vague feeling that something is still missing. As if the promise of completeness had been a mirage. This doesn't happen because you chose poorly. It doesn't happen because you're incapable of gratitude. It happens because that is the structure of desire. It was never meant to be satisfied. It was made to be renewed, indefinitely. Schopenhauer said that human life is essentially suffering, not because bad things happen, but because the very dynamics of desire ensure that we will never be at peace. When we don't have what we want, we suffer from its absence. When we have it, the pleasure is fleeting, and we are soon drawn to the next desire. There is no escape from this logic. The only difference between one person and another is the type of desire that drives them and the speed with which the cycle repeats itself. There are people who desire status. They spend their entire lives climbing hierarchies, accumulating titles, seeking recognition. And each achievement brings brief relief, followed by a new hunger. Because there is always someone above them. There is always the next step. And even when they reach the top, they discover that there is nothing there but more emptiness, just dressed up in more expensive clothes. There are people who desire security. They work tirelessly to accumulate money, to ensure that they will never lack anything, that they will be protected from any unforeseen events. But security never comes, because there is always a new risk, a possible threat, an uncertain future. And the more they accumulate, the more they realize that no amount of money can eliminate the fundamental vulnerability of being alive. There are people who want experiences, travel, adventure, new sensations. And each experience promises to be transformative, definitive, the one that will finally fill the void. But soon after returning, everyday life resumes its place. The memory of the experience becomes just another photo in an album, and the restlessness returns. Where to go now? What to do now? And there are people who desire love. They believe that by finding the right person, by building a deep bond, they will finally be complete. But even in the best relationships, even when there is genuine love, the promised completeness does not materialize. Because no person can fill the void that exists within you. No one was made for that role. And when they realize this, many panic. They think they chose wrong. They break up. They look for someone else. And the cycle repeats itself. Schopenhauer wasn't being cynical when he observed this. He was being brutally honest. He realized that human suffering does not arise from bad external circumstances, but from the very structure of desire. And as long as you believe that the problem is not having achieved enough, not having found the right person, not having arrived at the right place, you will remain stuck. Because the problem was never what is missing. The problem is the belief that something can in fact be enough. And here's the cruelest part. Society reinforces this illusion. At every moment, we are bombarded with promises that happiness is just around the corner. Work harder and you will be happy. Find your purpose and you will be happy. Buy this, achieve that, reach that milestone, and you will finally have peace. But no one does. No one gets there. Because there is no there. There is only the next desire. You may be thinking, but then what's the point? If nothing satisfies me, if the cycle never ends, why continue? And that's exactly the question Schopenhauer wanted you to ask. Because that's where most people choose one of two paths. Either they distract themselves violently, working harder, consuming more, seeking more, just to avoid facing the void. Or they stop, really stop, and look at the cycle with clarity, without judgment, without despair, just seeing it for what it is. But seeing the cycle is not the same as escaping it. You can recognize that you are trapped and still remain trapped. You can know that your desires will not bring you peace and still feel them with all their intensity. You can understand intellectually that the search is empty and still find yourself days later chasing after something new. Because the will doesn't care what you know. It continues to operate. Blind, relentless. And then the question arises that can no longer be postponed. If the cycle is endless, if will never rests, why do most of us continue to believe that one day everything will make sense? Why do we keep running, even though we know there is no finish line? What keeps us trapped in this charade? The answer is simple and terrifying. We continue because the alternative is worse, much worse. To stop running means to face the void directly. And the void, when there is no distraction to cover it up, is unbearable. So we choose illusion, not because we are fools, but because the truth, naked and raw, is too heavy to carry all the time. Schopenhauer knew this. He knew that most people, when faced with the real nature of existence, simply retreat. They construct new narratives. They find new meanings. They replace one illusion with another, more sophisticated, more palatable. Because living without illusion is like walking on the edge of an abyss, and few have the stomach for that. Look at your life. How many hours of your day are filled with activity just to avoid silence? You wake up, grab your phone, and start consuming information before you even get out of bed. During the day, you are always busy, always with something to do, something to solve, something to check. At night, you throw yourself into TV series, social media, anything that keeps your mind engaged. And when you are finally alone in silence, what do you feel? Discomfort, restlessness, and urgency to fill the void quickly. Because silence reveals something we spend our whole lives trying to hide. That deep down, when all distractions are removed, there is not much there. There is no clear meaning. There is no comforting narrative. Just the stark realization that we are here, alive, without knowing why, without knowing what for, carrying an existential weight that no one taught us how to deal with. And so we do what society has trained us to do. We fill the void with movement. We work obsessively. We consume compulsively. We seek digital validation, counting likes as if they were proof that we matter. We construct elaborate identities, the successful professional, the devoted parent, the authentic rebel, and cling to them as if they were absolute truths. Because without these masks, without these roles, who are we? The answer is terrifying. Perhaps no one. Nietzsche, who was deeply influenced by Schopenhauer before breaking with him, said something that echoes here. If you stare long enough into the abyss also stares back at you. Most people don't want to stare, because the abyss doesn't give back comforting answers. It only gives back more questions, more uncertainty, more emptiness. Schopenhauer observed that the entire structure of modern civilization is a collective attempt to escape this truth. We build elaborate systems, economic, social, cultural, that keep us busy, that give us goals, that make us believe we are progressing towards something. But where? Progress toward what? No one really knows. We just feel that we need to keep moving, because to stop would be to admit that perhaps there never was a destination. And when someone stops, really stops, and begins to question, society quickly intervenes. Are you depressed? Seek help. Feeling lost? Find your purpose. Questioning too much? You're thinking too much. As if the problem were the person, not the structure. As if the solution were to adjust the individual back to standard functioning, not to question whether the standard itself makes sense. But there is something deeply cowardly about this, not in seeking help when you need it, but in using help to go back to not questioning, to go back to accepting, to go back to running. Schopenhauer would say that this is just trading one prison for another. You may escape acute anxiety, but if you return to the same cycle of empty desires, to the same race with no destination, then you have not freed yourself. You have only found a more tolerable way to remain trapped. And the truth is that illusion is comfortable. It has its rewards. When you believe that your quest has meaning, when you believe that your efforts will be rewarded, when you believe that there is a greater plan, life becomes easier to bear. You wake up with a purpose, even if it is false. You work toward a goal, even if it is arbitrary. And you go to sleep believing that you are building something, even if it is just another layer of distraction. But at some point, and that point comes for everyone, the illusion begins to crack. It could be a crisis, a loss, a moment of forced silence. And in that moment, you see that you've spent years, maybe decades, chasing things that never delivered what they promised. You see that you have built an entire life on foundations you never examined. And the question that arises is brutal. How much time have you wasted believing in empty promises? And here, right here, is where most people make a choice. They can look into the abyss and acknowledge what they have seen. Or they can quickly find a new illusion, a new narrative, a new reason to keep running. And most choose the second option, because the first requires something that few are willing to give, the courage to live without certainties. If you've come this far, if these words are resonating with you in some way, then perhaps you are at the breaking point, at the point where the illusion no longer works as well as it used to. And if that's the case, I ask you, what are you going to do now? Will you look for a new distraction, a new narrative that makes you feel that everything has meaning? Or will you have the courage to keep looking, even knowing that on the other side there is no promise of happiness, only the possibility of lucidity? Because Schopenhauer does not promise that seeing the truth will free you from pain. He only promises that it will free you from illusion. And there is a huge difference between the two. Tearing the veil has consequences. Schopenhauer knew that. He lived it. Because when you finally see the illusion, when you recognize that much of life is just theater, something inside you changes irreversibly. And that change doesn't always make life easier. Often it makes it harder. There is a kind of loneliness that comes from lucidity. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people who still live within the illusion, while you can no longer pretend to believe. You participate in conversations, perform social rituals, smile in the right places, but inside there is a distance, a realization that what is being discussed, the concerns, the ambitions, the dramas, is all part of a game whose rules you can no longer take seriously. This does not make you superior. It does not make you better than anyone else. It just puts you in a different place. A place where the motivations that drive most people seem at the same time understandable and absurd. You understand why someone cares so much about a promotion, but you can't feel the same urgency. You understand why people cling to relationships that clearly don't work, but you can no longer do the same. You see? And seeing changes everything. Schopenhauer described it as a kind of tragic awakening. You wake up, but the world around you remains asleep. And there's no going back. There's no way to force yourself to believe again in the things that once seemed so important. The brilliant career, social recognition, external validation. All of this loses its power, not because you've become apathetic, but because you've seen that they were just mechanisms of the will, ways it found to keep you running. And then the real challenge begins. How to live knowing this. How to wake up every day, fulfill your obligations, maintain relationships, participate in a society that operates on premises you no longer accept. Some find a way to balance it. They live with one foot in and one foot out of the illusion. They do what they need to do, but without losing themselves completely in it. They maintain an internal distance, a space of observation where lucidity remains intact. But others cannot. The fracture is too great. They try to return to their routine, but everything seems false. Conversations seem empty. Ambitions seem childish. Social rituals seem like ridiculous performances. And worst of all, they can't explain this to anyone. Because when they try, they are seen as depressed, cynical, problematic. You're thinking too much. You need to distract yourself. You need to focus on positive things. As if the problem were having seen, not what was seen. Schopenhauer would say that these are the ones who paid the highest price for lucidity. Because seeing the truth without having the internal resources to bear it is like being stuck in a place with no way out. You can't go back to the illusion, but you also can't move beyond it. You are suspended in a limbo where everything seems meaningless, but life still demands that you participate. And here is the cruel paradox. Lucidity in itself does not alleviate suffering. On the contrary, it can intensify it. Because now you suffer not only from immediate pain, but from the awareness that this pain is structural, inherent, inevitable. You suffer not only from the frustration of an unfulfilled desire, but from the realization that even if it were fulfilled, it would not bring what it promises. You suffer not only from loss, but from the understanding that everything that can be gained can also be lost, and that deep down nothing is permanent, nothing is solid, nothing is secure. Many who reach this point ask themselves, was it worth it? Would it have been better to have continued sleeping? To live within the illusion, believing in promises, feeling that life has a clear meaning, even if it were false? And the answer is not obvious, because lucidity does not come with a guarantee of peace. It comes only with the impossibility of lying to oneself. But Schopenhauer also saw something else. He realized that those who bear the weight of lucidity, those who do not flee or despair, eventually find a different way of existing. Not an existence based on achievements, goals, desires, but an existence based on presence, on observation, on deep acceptance of what is, without the need for it to be anything else. These are rare, very rare, because reaching this point requires crossing the desert of disillusionment without giving up. It requires enduring the feeling that nothing matters without surrendering to destructive nihilism. It requires accepting that life has no given meaning, without concluding that it is not worth living. And perhaps that is the great division, not between those who see the illusion and those who do not, but between those who, upon seeing it, find a way to continue, and those who, upon seeing it, collapse. Because the truth in itself is not liberating. It is just the truth. What you do with it is what determines whether it liberates you or crushes you. Schopenhauer believed there was a way out, not a way out that eliminated suffering, but one that allowed you to transcend it, even if only momentarily. And that way out was not in achieving more, in desiring less, or in finding a definitive meaning. It was in something completely different, something that most people never truly experience. What if I told you that there are moments when the will can be silenced? Moments when you can exist without desire, without seeking, without the need for anything to be different from what it is? Moments when the veil dissolves and you really see without your mind distorting, without your will interfering? It exists. Schopenhauer called it contemplation. And perhaps it is the only real loophole we have. Schopenhauer was not a pessimist who preached despair. He was a realist who, after mapping human suffering in its essence, sought ways to transcend it. And he found something. Not a permanent solution, not a definitive way out, but loopholes. Fleeting moments when the tyranny of will dissolves and something different becomes possible. Moments when you simply exist, without wanting, without seeking, without needing anything to be different from what it is. He called this aesthetic contemplation. And before you think this is abstract theory, think about the last time you lost yourself completely in something. A song perhaps. You were listening and at some point you stopped just listening. The music moved you in such a way that you forgot yourself. You weren't thinking about work, problems, or unfulfilled desires. You weren't analyzing the composition or judging the quality. You were just there, completely present, dissolved in that experience. And for a few minutes, maybe seconds, you experienced something rare, peace. Not the peace of having achieved something, but the peace of not needing to achieve anything. Or think of a landscape that paralyzed you. You were walking, perhaps on a trail, and suddenly you reached a point where the view opened up. Mountains, ocean, a sky impossible to describe. And you stopped, not to take a picture, not to think about what you were seeing, but just to see. And in that moment, something inside you fell silent. The incessant internal dialogue, the worries, the plans, all of that disappeared. And there was just you and that. No separation, no distance, no desire. This is what Schopenhauer called disinterested contemplation. Disinterested does not mean indifferent. It means without self-interest, without the interference of the will. You are not looking at the landscape thinking about how you can use it, possess it, transform it into something. You are just seeing. And in this pure act of seeing without wanting anything in return, the will loses its power. For a moment, you cease to be a slave to your desires and become pure consciousness. Art has this power. Not just any art, not just any superficial experience of cultural consumption, but those rare moments when a work strikes you in such a way that you lose track of yourself. A painting that paralyzes you, a poem that destabilizes you, a symphony that transports you to a state you didn't even know existed. In those moments, you are not thinking about how it makes you feel. You are not interpreting symbolism. You are not comparing it to other works. You are simply being traversed by it. And in that total surrender, there is a form of freedom that no external achievement can provide. Schopenhauer saw artists, true creators, as those who can access this state more frequently and deeply. They do not create to be recognized. They do not create to win awards or validation. They create because, in the act of creation, they are able to transcend themselves. They are able to touch something that is beyond individuality, beyond the ego, beyond the will. And when a work is born from this place, it has the power to take those who contemplate it to that same state. But you don't have to be an artist to access this. Anyone can experience these glimpses. The question is, how often do you allow this to happen? How often do you really stop without an agenda, without expectations, and just observe? Observe the sky changing color at dusk. Observe the rain hitting the window. Observe the silence of dawn. Not to post, not to reflect on, but just to be present. Most people don't do this, because stopping without a purpose seems like a waste. We live in a culture that values only what is productive, what generates results, what can be converted into something useful. And contemplation generates nothing. It doesn't make you more successful. It doesn't solve your problems. It doesn't bring you closer to your goals. And so it is seen as a luxury, as something for when you have time to spare, which never happens. But Schopenhauer would say that this is the most tragic inversion that modernity has brought about, because these moments of contemplation, these glimpses of transcendence, are the only ones in which you truly live. Everything else, the rush, the achievements, the desires, is just survival disguised as life. It is the will operating through you, keeping you in perpetual motion, never allowing you to truly rest. And there is yet another path that Schopenhauer explored, a more radical, more difficult, but also more profound path: renunciation. Not moralistic renunciation, not repressed denial, but the voluntary extinction of desire. Inspired by Eastern philosophies, especially Buddhism, he realized that there is a difference between suppressing a desire and ceasing to desire. Suppression is violent. It is when you want something but force yourself not to seek it. The desire is still there, pressing, corroding, and eventually it explodes in another way. But ceasing to desire is different. It is when you see desire for what it is, a manifestation of will, not a real need, and it simply loses its power. Not because you repressed it, but because you understood it. The great sages of the contemplative traditions lived this. Buddha, upon reaching enlightenment, did not destroy his desires through willpower. He saw them so clearly that they ceased to have power over him. It wasn't that he didn't feel hunger, pain, or tiredness. He did, but he no longer identified with these sensations. He didn't construct narratives around them. He didn't despair when they arose, nor did he cling to them when they ceased. He simply let them be what they were, temporary phenomena without real substance. Schopenhauer deeply admired this attitude, but he also recognized that very few people are capable of reaching this point, because it requires not only intellectual understanding, but a profound transformation of how you relate to your own existence. It requires letting go of everything you have built as your identity. It requires accepting that nothing you pursue has the value you have attributed to it. It requires letting go, and how many are willing to do that? How many can live without the illusion that someday everything will make sense, without the promise that effort will be rewarded, without the hope that life in the end has a greater plan? Few, very few. And Schopenhauer did not judge that. He merely recognized that total renunciation is a path for the rare few, for those whose pain has become so unbearable that letting go of everything seems lighter than continuing to carry it. But between fleeting aesthetic contemplation and total renunciation, there is a space where most of us live, a space where we are neither completely deluded nor completely awake, where we see the truth sometimes but not always, where we experience glimpses of freedom but are soon pulled back into the cycle. And the question remains, what do we do with these glimpses? Do we ignore them? Do we seek to repeat them? Or do we learn something from them that changes, even subtly, the way we live? Because Schopenhauer does not promise that you will escape the will. He only promises that you can, in rare and precious moments, transcend it. And that these moments, however brief, reveal something essential. That there is a way of existing that does not depend on conquest, validation, or imposed meaning. A way that simply is. And maybe, just maybe, recognizing that this exists is already the beginning of something. But what then? After you have seen that it is possible not to desire, even if only for a few seconds? After you have experienced the peace that comes from simply existing without wanting anything in return? What do you do when you return to ordinary life, where will reassumes control, where desires return, where the cycle begins again? How do you live knowing that freedom is possible but also ephemeral? That is the real question. Not whether you can tear the veil. You can, even if only momentarily. But how to live after you have seen it. How to wake up every day knowing that much of what drives the people around you is illusion. Knowing that your own desires are blind manifestations of a force that does not belong to you. Knowing that there is no final destination, no guaranteed reward, no given meaning. Schopenhauer does not offer a comforting answer. He does not say that everything will be fine, that you will find permanent peace, that life will become easy, but he offers something more honest, the possibility of living with lucidity. And lucidity is not the same as happiness. It is in fact something much rarer and more valuable. It is the ability to look at life without illusions and still not surrender to despair. Living aware of the illusion means recognizing that you will still desire. You will still feel hungry for achievement, recognition, love. But now you know. You know that these desires are not you. You know that satisfying them will not bring what they promise. And that awareness changes everything. It does not eliminate desire, but it creates a distance. a small margin between impulse and action, a space where you can choose not whether you will give in or not, but how you will relate to what you feel. There is a huge difference between being carried away by a desire and observing it. When you are carried away, you are the desire. It defines you, controls you, consumes you. But when you observe it, something changes. You continue to feel, but you are no longer fused with it. You realize, will is at work. It's pushing me in this direction. And in that realization, there is a small, very small freedom. This does not mean that you will stop acting. It does not mean that you will become passive, apathetic, disengaged from life. Schopenhauer did not advocate this. What he advocated was a different form of engagement, a form where you participate but you don't lose yourself, where you do what needs to be done, but without the illusion that doing so will complete you, where you love, work, create, but without the expectation that these things will save you. And perhaps that is the most difficult wisdom of all, because it means accepting that life owes you nothing, that you can do everything right and still not find the promised peace, that you can love deeply and still feel lonely, that you can achieve everything you dreamed of and still wake up with that inexplicable emptiness, and that this is not a failure. It's not because you chose wrong, didn't try hard enough, or are not worthy. It's just the nature of things. Most philosophies try to sell you a solution. Do this and you'll be happy. Believe this and you'll find meaning. Schopenhauer doesn't sell anything. He just describes what he sees. And what he sees is that human life is essentially tragic, not because bad things happen, but because the very structure of existence ensures that we will never be completely at peace. And faced with this truth, you have two options: deny it or accept it. Denying it is easy. It's what most people do. They keep running, keep believing, keep hoping that one day it will be different. And there's no judgment in that, because denial can be a way to survive. It may be the only way some people find to keep going, but accepting it is different. Accepting it is not resignation. It is not conformity. It is not giving up on life and surrendering to nihilism. Accepting is looking at tragedy and saying, yes, that's it, and yet I'm still here. It is recognizing that there is no solution, but that the absence of a solution does not make life worthless. It is understanding that meaning does not come from outside. It is not waiting to be discovered, but is something you create, or not, at every moment. Schopenhauer would say that few reach this point, and even those who do don't stay there all the time. Lucidity is difficult to sustain. You have moments of absolute clarity, where you see everything with painful clarity, and then life pulls you back. Desires resurface, worries return, and you find yourself once again running, searching, wanting. And that's okay, because you're not a saint. You're not an enlightened sage. You're just someone who has seen something true and is trying to live with it. And maybe that's what it means to tear the veil. It's not a magical transformation where everything changes at once. It's a slow, gradual process where you recognize illusions as they appear, where you learn to let go a little at a time, where you come to accept that life has no script, no destination, no final reward, and that despite this, or perhaps because of it, there is still beauty. There are still moments that are worthwhile. There are still reasons to go on. Schopenhauer lived this. He was not a happy man in the conventional sense. He was lonely, often bitter, deeply aware of the suffering inherent in existence. But he was also someone who found in art, philosophy, and contemplation ways to transcend that suffering. Not to eliminate it, but to exist despite it. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy he left behind. The idea that you don't need illusions to live. That the truth, however hard it may be, can be endured. That there is dignity in seeing. And now you have reached the end of this journey. Not because everything has been resolved, not because you have found the definitive answer, but because some things have been said that cannot be unsaid. Some truths have been seen that cannot be unseen. And from now on you carry that. You can ignore it. You can forget it. You can go back to the hustle and bustle and pretend you never heard those words. Or you can let them work on you, silently, without fanfare, just gradually changing the way you look at things. The veil of Maya is still there. It continues to envelop the world, distorting perceptions, feeding desires. But you now know that it exists. And knowing this, just knowing, is already a form of freedom. Small perhaps, insufficient certainly, but real. And in the end, maybe that's all we have. Schopenhauer doesn't promise that you'll be happy. He only promises that you can be lucid. And that in this lucidity, there is a form of peace that doesn't depend on achievements, validations, or imposed meanings. A peace that simply recognizes, this is what it is, and I am here, seeing. If this video moves something inside you, leave a comment. What was the most difficult illusion to break in your life? Watch the next videos on the channel. Count on me. and follow the white rabbit.